This was the first ever German tech tree super heavy that was released into World of Tanks Blitz, being the E100. Still to this day, this vehicle is still fairly popular, and it's possibly one of the deadliest heavies that occur throughout the course of this game. The reason why is because you can see by the gun that I'm running, the 12.8 centimeter, that it is basically the mouse gun. However, this gun did get buffed, so now its DPM is sitting at almost 2800 with a 9.96 second, just shy of 10 seconds of reload time. That really takes the cake in terms of its counterpart being the mouse. However, sitting at only 2583 damage per minute when you are running your calibrated shells, having the same penetration factors and having the same average alpha. It's more better to run this gun than it is with the top gun. However, you still chunk, and this gun right here, surprisingly enough, throughout the course of the previous couple updates, has gotten significant aiming time and dispersion buffs throughout those updates. And in terms of what the armor profile is going for, it's upwards of 270 on its turret and 200 on its hull. And this is what the current armor profile looks like. You may think on paper that it looks pretty insane, considering that the full-on turret is upwards of 296, and you got the full-on upper infrastructure being upwards in the high 350s, while even having a lower plate, which can be troll at times, especially when you angle it in a position like this. Yeah, it's now going to thicken it up to 310, which means you'd have to load in your premiums in order to guarantee a pen when it's pretty much at an angle like this, only upwards of 289. When it's fully angled on when you are backing into cover zones is where this thing's upper and lower plate can be quite insane at times. Upwards of 467, and then the upper plate upwards in the high 600s. But the tank is really going to fall apart when an enemy is lurking around running premium ammunition. Especially with Kali. You can see the turret is now 311, and it's going to be buttered without a hassle. Even if I pull something that's probably of a low caliber, like a CS63, for example, you still will be able to cut through this turret upwards of 305 millimeters if you do manage to hit it in the right spot, which is on the lower end part of the turret, even when you are running your calibrated shells along with that. But when this vehicle does use gun depression, it's where a CS63 is going to struggle to cut through the upper turret, as it gets it now to a 330. However, there is a very tiny quarter cutout that is located underneath the turret ring, which means that if you are lucky enough, considering that the CS63 has a fairly accurate gun in certain regards, you can overmatch this spot right here, surprisingly enough, when it's using gun depression. And then for the side of the vehicle, the side of the turret is upwards of 165 to 166, and then the full-on side is about 121 space, which means that heat shells will struggle to cut through the full-on side as it is penciled in as spaced armor, and the fact that heat shells have less of a piercing effect when trying to cut through spaced armor to the best of its ability, which means that you are going to bounce in certain aspects. And then finally, for the rear, the back of the turret is 151, and then the full-on rear is upwards of 182. Of course, a 183 is going to be able to cut through it, but anything that's lower than about like 100 mils of Hesh pen is going to struggle to cut right through this. Like, look at the rear right here, 194. It's too thick in order to be withstand by the majority of vehicles that have an HE output of about this amount of millimeters right here. It's actually kind of crazy to think about. In terms of the aiming time for what this gun has to feature, it's upwards of 3.9 seconds with a .292 dispersion. I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, especially because this one has a little bit of worse aiming time and dispersion, but it has increasingly gotten better because when the E100 was first released, it was in the upper 5s in terms of its aiming time, and it was almost at .4 dispersion. Think about that. This thing was hella inaccurate. I remember my dad playing this vehicle using this gun a lot because it chunks in terms of average damage, but it does struggle with the aiming time. But luckily enough, it's nerfed down to a point to where it can basically snap the shell and basically get away with everything. Just like your average typical Jagdpanzer E100 player who literally just has to rely on turning his hull and then snapping the shell, penning it pretty much 24/7. I mean, those tanks are absolutely stupid in that aspect. The E100, on the other hand, possibly still a fairly popular tank that's being used nowadays. It's upwards in a high win percentage rating as well, kind of in competence to like some of those other heavies in that aspect. And it really takes the cake just with the sheer amount of armor that it features. Although that calibrated shells has gotten substantial amounts of changes throughout the course of the previous updates, is where the armor tends to fall apart nowadays. However, if you angle it properly, you will get a lot more troll bounces than usual. That would basically account for when you are after you fire a shot and you angle your turret just about 45 degrees over to the right or left. It's going to be a little bit tough in order for vehicles to try to see where they can overmatch the proper spot, especially for having a turret that is considerably thick. So here we are loaded on into game number 1. Let's see. We're going to actually get a head up on the hill in this one, as they do have a Rheinmetall Panzerwagen. So let us go ahead and do such case with our T95E6, and then we're going to head on up there. We got our Jagdpanzeroni heading on upwards with us as well, so let's see what we can do. This tank doesn't have the best of maneuverability, but it does have fairly solid traverse speed. I mean, being a German super heavy, you would expect this thing to be fairly slow on its traverse, but surprisingly enough, it's actually quite quick. Don't really know the exact number apart from its traverse speed, but it is quickly and rapidly enough in order to get the job well done, to turning your tank at a more rapid rate to take advantage over some other vehicles that would have worse of it than this. Alright, so, it looks like their whole team went city, which is actually kind of crazy. The Rheinmetall, on the other hand, actually made a very good decision apart from that. If I was in that tank, I probably would have just spotted out these guys up on the hill and then probably just bailed on out for it. But instead, he decides to want to go with his team. Probably a good idea considering that all of us decided to want to go over to this side of the map. So let's go ahead and mosey on down real quick and see what we can have spotting off in the base. We got the 60. Oh, kind of figured that was coming, so alright. Let's go ahead and mosey on forward. We got the WZ-113. We also got the 268 spotted off in the back. Let us go ahead and move on up. Alright, so it looks like he's out of the base now. We got the 268 spotted off towards the far side right there. There's a nice tap for 478 into his vehicle, so then we're reloading once again. He gets plucked for 653. We're going to mosey on up and get a finishing clear into you. Beautiful stuff. So let's go ahead and mosey on through right over here. We got the WZ-114, or 113, sorry. 421 slapperoonie into him. Alright, and then we're just gonna, oh, perfect. We get a bounce from the WZ. Let's go ahead and fire in on his side for 453. You can already see the good stuff that's occurring with this gun. It's sincerely accurate, and it's got pretty solid DPM levels, and we have our adrenaline rand as well, so that we can get fire in a more rapid period of time. We got the Super Conk off to the side. We also got the Chieftain Mark 6. We got the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, who looks like he's going to poke on out. Alright, come on, Stinker. I'm waiting for him to either make a poke like that. However, the Hesh didn't do squat as apart from that. Alright, so reloading once again. We got the Jagdpanzeroni off to the side. Can't spot him just yet. Now we can. Let's go ahead and get a slap for 409. He does not aim in on me. Got the Rheinmetall, and we get a bounce from him as well. Angles. That's possibly the most important factor that contributes to you getting a lot more troll bounces than usual while playing in the E100. Got the Rheinmetall. There's a better HE roll of 586 right there. Alright, so reloading yet again. Let's go ahead and mosey on forward, as these are the last two enemies remaining. We got the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen. Also got the Jagdpanzeroni. Alright, Jag fires, so let's go ahead and mosey our way up over towards him. Oh, unfortunately, that's somebody missed, so let's go ahead and fire a nice 460. And then we get on over to his side, just lickety-split. And then we're just going to finish him off without a hassle. And that's a fairly solid game. Let's see how much we did. 3378, not bad of a result. That's where this vehicle's DPM levels can become sincerely deadly, and why this gun nowadays is possibly a hard-hitting and a rapid-firing beast nowadays compared to what it used to be like before it ever got changed, apart from the balanced schematics. So in this one, we were able to do second on the team. Our Jag put up a fairly solid result. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and run a game with the 15 centimeter and see how we can fare well. The DPM levels are worse, and the reload time is 17.93, almost 18 seconds, but you do chunk in terms of your average alpha, because this thing's alpha did significantly get buffed from about 600 damage to 660 now, which means that you can get those occasional 700 rolls here and there, kind of the same of what it is when you are running in a vehicle like the WZ113 GFT. However, the advantage of being in something like this is that you have more troll armor than the WZ113 GFT does. It's kind of unfortunate that Wargaming decided to change that vehicle to a point to where premium ammo can butter through that full-on upper infrastructure no matter what the outcome is. It's kind of stupid to even think about. But for having a hard-hitting gun that's in competence to the E100 is where it can sincerely take the cake, and you can roll in the upper 700s, which is absolutely a ginormous roll. Especially if you're in something like a super heavy, for example, that pretty much the average rolls that you can get from that is probably about like 500 to 600 damage. But 700 in most regards, now that's something else. So here we are loading on into game number 2. They have an M4 MLE-54, a Concept, an IS-7, and a T-57 Heavy. So let us go ahead and mosey on over with our team then towards the middle. See what we can spot apart from that. So moseying on through, we got a 907 who looks like he's going to be lurking on over there. However, not able to spot him just yet, but that's pretty much all going to change. All right. And a beautiful example right there, 643 out of his vehicle. This gun absolutely chunks, and in terms of a super heavy man, it takes advantage over a lot of others. Like a 60 or a 114 is not able to put up that solid outcome. A VK72 can, but that is only to when you are using tungsten. Oh my gosh, 700 damage, bro. Oh my goodness, that is a fairly solid roll. All right, let's go ahead and mosey on up then. We got the Grill 15 right over there. Let's see if we can get a nice chunker of hit points dealt into him. We're going to angle our turret, and he does end up heading us in that half deck. 882, even with small liner ran. Oh my goodness, that is where this vehicle's gun, or the 15 centimeter gun, can become sincerely deadly. Just getting those absolutely chunkers of rolls. All right, well, we got the Concept off to the side. He's going to be moseying on up right there. 825! Yo, this gun slaps, bro. Look at that. 3 shots and we're already upwards past 3,000 damage. Think about that, dude. That is crazy to think about in a super heavy. All right, so we're going to be moseying on up over here. We got the enemy 183 lurking off towards the back right over there. Of course, snapping us for 1,000 damage, but we get him back for a 700 in terms of making up for that. All right, so reloading once again. The good news is that we have more DPM levels than this 183 does. So we're going to mosey on up. I honestly don't care if he gets another tap into my vehicular, as I'm going to be able to outdo the crap out of his vehicle. All right, there's the 183 once again. Another slap for 624. And I should say the aiming time and dispersion is possibly much better than what it typically was to when I first played this tank. I mean, I noticed a major difference, bro. Like, that is insane. 5 shots, 4,000 instant damage, bro. That's insane. A 60 TP and a 114 SP2 cannot compete with that, bro. Like, holy cow. That was absolutely a farm fest upon from only firing only 5 shells. Absolutely crazy. However, we were only able to block 490 only from the IS-7. Apart from that, that is going to be an instant top on the team in that aspect. I know I could be having more fun in this vehicle, but I do gotta say, that is where I gotta drop the mic in terms of that. The E100 still nowadays, I can see now why it's still considerably to this day one of the most popular super heavies to go for. And why in the hands of an average player, they pretty much don't even require skill, because you can basically just snap the shell and it can basically pen every single time. Kind of the same as what those typical YAG E100 players experience. So hopefully you guys did end up enjoying today's video on the other hand, and if you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and make sure to turn those bell notifications while you're at it, so you do not miss out on any new videos or streams, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace out, y'all.